Final Fantasy XIV provides so much variety of content, but a gaping hole in that has been, and for a while now, challenging content for parties. Sure, raids exist and they are there for the large groups, but what about players who don't want to raid, but they still want a challenge? Well, variant dungeons are coming to fill in that hole. Yoshida said in the past that this was something the developers have been looking into, and started giving more weight to it during that interview blitz before Endwalker. Now, this is just a theory, but I think what really pushed the developers into releasing this kind of content was the exodus of WoW players into Final Fantasy XIV. You see, in World of Warcraft, there's Mythic Plus, and love it or hate it, Mythic Plus provided smaller groups with challenging content. There is an audience for this content, and that audience is growing in Final Fantasy XIV. So, we've been waiting with a bated breath for a long time now to see what the developers have in store for us, and in the recent live letter, we learned a little bit about what we can expect. The first thing that got me really excited is that they are giving us a brand new dungeon type, the aforementioned variant dungeons. They aren't just scaling up the old dungeons and calling it a day. No. They are putting some real effort into this. So the dungeon that we're getting in 6.25 is called the Sildine Subterrane, and from what they told us so far, it does seem to be a meaty bit of content. Also, Yoshida said that they plan to release more of these dungeons throughout Endwalker. It just might not be every major patch. So why do they call it variant dungeons, and what can we look forward to in this new dungeon type? It's called a variant dungeon because you can choose between several routes to get to the end. Of course the dungeon has a story tied to it, this is Final Fantasy XIV after all, and the cool thing is, the way that the story unfolds is determined by the routes that you take. It's like a choose-your-own-adventure book, and that just sounds so cool to me. So, to experience the full story, you're gonna need to run through the dungeon multiple times, which, in turn, gives these dungeons a lot more replay value. And that's why I'm so glad they are trying something new here. This just sounds like so much fun. Having a dungeon that is open and gives you choices on how to proceed, well, that is something we don't have in the MSQ dungeons. Now, while that might be all well and good, the challenge of it is what has me the most excited. So, variant dungeons will come in 3 flavors of difficulty, which means they are designing this content to appeal to multiple playstyles. The base difficulty is the variant dungeon. You can think of this as normal mode. It's there for players who want to experience the story without being challenged too much. So, for this mode, you can create any party size with any composition. You want to go at it alone, or with 4 white mages? It's entirely up to you. The enemies, they scale based on the party size. The next level of difficulty is called Another Path Criterion Dungeon. So, if the variant difficulty is normal mode, then this would be like stepping into extremes. The first big change is that you need a normal party, a tank, healer, and 2 DPS. For Another Path, you are able to matchmake to fill in the empty spots. Now, something that I was concerned about was, how would the resurrections be handled? And I think their solution was perfect. The resurrection spell will be turned off, and instead, all of the party members will get a special action that allows a limited number of revives. Think Delubrum Reginae and how the actions worked in there. So, you can't just make a party of red mages and summoners and res your way to victory. This makes it so much more fair, since every group will have the same amount of revives, regardless of their party composition. Now, what would a higher difficulty be if the enemies weren't made more challenging to defeat? Well, of course they are going to be made more challenging, but my hope is that it's not merely scaling up the damage and HP. I would love to see more mechanics added as well. Maybe even extra environmental hazards. Another change from the base difficulty is that the route is going to be predetermined. It's another path through the dungeon, a more difficult path. And the last thing is that enemies defeated in this mode will remain defeated if the party wipes. This will be an important distinction from the highest difficulty. And the highest difficulty is Criterion Dungeon Savage. So for Savage, you need to have a full party ready because there will be no matchmaking. So something interesting to note here is that Yoshida made a point that Another Path is the high difficulty, and that Savage is there to provide additional challenges. I think that is to say that the enemies won't be getting additional scaling or mechanics for the Savage mode. So then, what are these additional challenges? Well, the first is that there will be 0 resurrections allowed in Savage, and if the group wipes, all of the enemies respawn. Also, enemies become much stronger if they aren't killed fast enough. Now, I noticed he didn't say enraged, which usually indicates that you are going to wipe now. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but it looks like that could be a very fun way to add even more challenge. Let all the enemies empower themselves, and then try to kill them. Fun for the whole family. Though I do think the point of it is to keep the players moving along, and not waiting between every single pull for all the cooldowns to be ready. So Savage is looking pretty hardcore, right? If someone dies halfway through, well, they remain on the floor until the group wipes or clears. And if the group does wipe, well then you have to start all over. It's kind of like a raid encounter, but in dungeon form. Now, while I am very excited for this, I have heard some concerns. I know WoW players that came to Final Fantasy XIV who hate, with a capital H, what Mythic Plus did to the raiding scene. And the fear is that these Criterion Dungeons, well, they may have a similar effect in Final Fantasy XIV. But here's the thing, Mythic Plus was not a bad idea. It was just implemented in the Blizzard way. That is to say,
Boy.
What Blizzard did was made M Plus a chore that raiders needed to do in order to be raid ready. And don't we all just love having chores to do every day? Not only that, Mythic Plus is full of RNG nonsense and plagued with design decisions that only led to increased frustration and toxicity. Final Fantasy XIV has been really good with not doing any of those things, not making content feel like it's a chore that needs to be done. And I have faith that the developers won't do that here. This is why I am not concerned, and I am really looking forward to learning more about these in the upcoming live letter. There are 2 things that I am curious about, and I didn't know where else to put them, so here they are. The first is, what is the reward structure going to be like? My guess would be purely cosmetic. When you look at, I don't know, like Unreals and Ultimates, they are purely cosmetic, so I don't see why this wouldn't be. The second is, are there going to be bosses in these dungeons? They mentioned how all the enemies would reset on Savage, but nothing about bosses. Anyways, so, are you all excited for the variant dungeons? I think it's pretty awesome that they're adding even more variety to this already amazing game. Well, that's it for this one. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked what you saw, please consider leaving a like, comment, and subscribing. I know it's been a bit since my last video. I unfortunately got really sick and lost my voice. It's been a rough couple of weeks, but I do have more stuff planned. And until next time, bye!